Hi, everyone, and welcome. And thank you all for joining us today for Your Money After the Military webinar. We're really glad you're here. I see we have a couple of folks in here. So I'm Crystal Spell, and I lead our military-focused work here through Veteran Saves here at America Saves. And I'm always glad to have Amy, our Director of America Saves, joining me. So Amy, do you want to jump in and quickly introduce yourself in the America Saves program?
Yes, hi. Like Crystal said, my name is Amy Miller, and I am the director of America Saves. If you're not familiar with America Saves, just a quick rundown. We are a national campaign that focuses on building financial confidence through paying down debt, and saving for major milestones and building future wealth. And I'm so happy to be here this morning.
Yeah, we're always glad to have you, Amy. And Veteran Saves is also part of that work. We're specifically focused on veterans and transitioning service members and the military connected community. And we know that, financial life in the military looks very different from civilian life. And that transition can come with a lot of changes that aren't always clearly explained.
That is why today's topic really matters. Transitioning out of the military, isn't just about finding a new job. It's a full financial shift, right? Income changes, benefits change, housing costs can look different, and there can be a ton of gaps in between.
And what we hear consistently from veterans is that a lot of those changes catch people off guard. So today's really about just helping you better understand what that transition looks like financially and how to prepare for it in a realistic way.
Yeah. Okay. So before we get started, just a couple of quick notes. If you're joining us live, we'll keep everyone muted during the presentation. And if you have questions, feel free to add them to the Q&A box. We'll be monitoring them and we'll get to them at the end if time allows. And of course, you can always email us after the presentation at save@americasaves.org.
All right, so we're going to get started. So we're really excited to have Sarah Roeder from Armed Forces Mutual with us today. So Sarah is the Director of Partnerships and Member Engagement there, where she focuses on connecting military families and veterans with resources and support that, make a real difference during and after service. And she's also a certified financial educator, instructor, and brings over 15 years in working directly with veterans, including her previous role supporting VA-related services. So again, she's going to walk us through what that financial transition actually looks like in real terms and share some really practical guidance and, actionable steps that you can use as you move into civilian life. And with that, Sarah, the floor is yours. I'll turn it over to you.
Thank you so much, Crystal and Amy, for having me here today and part of the Veteran Saves initiative. I'm really excited today to talk about finances. We're going to keep it high energy because, sometimes finances can get a little bit into the weeds, but we're going to keep this really high energy. We're going to keep this on tangible things we can focus on regarding your money after the military, what we see at Armed Forces Mutual and what I've seen over the course of 15 years in this industry as some of our pitfalls. I'm also a military spouse. My husband retired from the service after 23 years, so I went through this and have personal and professional some insight into that. So we're going to move on to our next slide, which is going to tell us about the financial landscape of our military community, right? So before I get into the meat and potatoes, we need to have a little bit of foundational understanding as to why we see our military service members and military spouses sometimes struggle with their finances. And it starts well before you transition from the service. So foundationally, a lot of this has to do with our military spouse employment or the lack thereof, right? A lot of our statistics in this slide have lots of numbers on it as to what and why that's happening. But if 77% of our military says that two incomes are vital to their household, but we have the largest population and demographic of unemployed spouses in our country, then they're not getting those two incomes, which translates directly into not having enough of an emergency fund, not having enough savings. And that is a big deciding factor into how are you going to transition from the service? What does your life after the military and what is your money going to do for you after the military if you don't have enough of it? So I wanted to just give a quick touch point on foundationally why we see a lot of times those who are in service transitioning have that struggle, and let people know that you're not alone in that, right? You're not alone in that financial struggle, but there are some things we can do to set ourselves up for success, whether you have already transitioned from the service and maybe it's going well, maybe it's not going so well, how to start now to change that. We're going to talk about that. And then if you're gearing up for that transition, what you can do ahead of time to set yourself up for success. So we're going to move on to our next slide here, which is really simple, right? I wanted to keep this high level, really simple. Let's just talk a little bit about what you will lose or you already have lost if you've transitioned from the service. One of those big things is life insurance. A lot of that is tax-free income and healthcare. Now, there's a difference between those who are retiring and those who are separating, right? If you are separating from service, you're going to lose a lot more of your entitlements and benefits than those who are retiring. They get to keep some of it. But what they get to keep, they have to pay for now, right? So you still kind of lose it in a sense, in that it's going to cost you now something more. And so let's understand what we're going to gain financially. Where are some opportunities that you may already be getting some income into you, or that you could potentially get income when you transition from the service? VA compensation. Every single veteran should be putting in a VA disability claim. You should be getting that tax-free money for not only yourself, your family, but for your survivor. The pension, your retirement pension for those who are retiring, that's an added income that you're going to get that those who are separating do not. And then our freedom of choice. That's a big one. Where do you live and how are you going to spend your time? That also affects your finances. So these are kind of what we're going to kind of framework in our understanding. I'm going to move on to our next slide, which is what I find to be the biggest question, the biggest concern. I can tell you, my own husband didn't believe me when I showed him these numbers and he was getting ready to retire. And I said, hey, this is the reality of it. There is a huge pay gap between what people are receiving when they're in the military to what they receive after they leave the service, the civilian equivalent. And so it's really important to understand this. You might have already transitioned into a civilian sector job and found this out the hard way. That's okay. Best to start now, or you're getting ready to transition and you will potentially find this out the hard way if you don't prepare for it. So what is this? It's a military versus civilian pay gap. And we have this really great downloadable at Armed Forces Mutual, and we'll make sure that we give you the link for that, but you can download that. We've run this for an E8, an E6, and an O3. And what it outlines is, and we'll go on to the next slide because it's kind of blown up, is that only 15 to 20% of those leaving the military are retiring from service, right? Now, I've gone ahead and put the retirement one on here because you can see we have a civilian pay and pension, and then we have just a civilian equivalent. But take a look at this. I cannot tell you, I can count hundreds of times in the last 15 years that service members call a year after they have left the military and they say, I have a huge tax bill, especially those who are retiring. They say, I owe $20,000 or $30,000. Those who are not retiring usually say, I all of a sudden, it's been a year and I can't make the same payments to my bills and I can't keep up financially like I used to in the military, but I'm making the same amount of money. And it's because you're not. There is a huge discrepancy. This is one of the biggest kind of your money after the military understanding things that we need to talk about. You can see right here how we've broken up that people don't realize how their BAH is taxed. People don't realize about special pay. People don't realize about the federal taxes that they are not paying because they're getting certain income tax free to them. They don't realize about state taxes. I was a military spouse. I lived in California, but my home of record was Tennessee. And let me tell you, everybody I worked with in California was very jealous of the fact that I didn't have to pay California state income tax, right? Because my home record was in Tennessee. But I could work in California and I could make money in California and I got to keep more of it. Well, when you leave the service, you no longer have that ability. Your spouse no longer does, and nor do you. And it can make a big difference. You can see here, it could be almost $9,000. And then, of course, that healthcare cost. I put this in there because that's one of the biggest things people don't realize. Even if you're retiring, you now have to pay for healthcare. And if you aren't retiring, then you're going to have to not only pay for healthcare, but pay a lot more for it. So this is one of the things that I really want to highlight, really want to talk about is understanding the pay difference. I mean, we can look at this. This is, it's a significant amount of money, 20 to 30 to 40, sometimes $1,000 more that you need to ask for in the civilian world than what you were receiving in the active duty world. So it's pretty impactful here. Like I said, we've got a great great graphs and great charts you can download to get a better understanding of this. If you're getting ready to transition from the service, then understand this ahead of time. If you didn't know this and didn't know to look at this, then start now. It's never too late to start to understand this and to get yourself on right footing. So we'll move on to kind of our next section here, which is how do we gain some control, maybe in some uncontrollable times. Transitioning from the military can feel very uncontrollable. I can attest to that. We went through this. There is so much that you're having to navigate. Once you get onto the other side, I kind of say of things, it takes 1 year to 2 years to settle in, right? To really understand. Now, if you prepare ahead of time, then you have a better chance of finding that foundational footing. The budget is one of the biggest things you can do. It's also one of the hardest, right? When we talk about a budget, it's really easy to say, yeah, just budget your money. Use a 50-30-20 budget. If you don't know what that is, you can check it out at Armed Forces Mutual. We've got a great explanation and a planning worksheet even. But it's really easy to say, but it can be very hard in practice to do. And both you and your spouse have to be on board with that budget. Otherwise, it doesn't work. But it's really important to do this with the foundational understanding of what is my military versus civilian pay? What do I need to make up? And then how am I going to do that? And on the very, very first slide, I showed you about why this financial readiness matters. And so I'm going to tell you because 38% of our veteran families, those who don't have a pension, they're not retired, they just left the military, 38% of them left with less than $500 in emergency fund. That is nowhere near enough money to make your final move, to get settled in, to feel comfortable. And so a budget really does help do that. So when we talk about your money after the military, this is one of the biggest things that can help and do that. So that's what I wanted to make sure everybody had access to that, understood that. And then we'll move on to our kind of our wrap up, which is our military transition timeline. And so this timeline is great. It's a great way for you to say, okay, we start at 12 months out, 1 to 2 years, and say, start doing these things month by month by month, every month, to knock down those targets of leaving the military financially. Something I'll add here is about your TSP. That's a really big question that we get. We address that in the military transition timeline. So another great downloadable. A lot of questions we receive is, what do I do with my TSP? I have a TSP. Can I still contribute to this TSP? What do I need to do with it? And so we answer some of those questions here. What I can tell you is you need to educate yourself on the TSP. It is right? Your money, it is a retirement. What are you going to do with it now after you leave the military? How are you going to manage it and make sure you're managing it properly? And if you need help with that, that there are trusted organizations and resources to be able to help you with that. So I really like our transition timeline. It goes through a really great way to set yourself up for success, whether you're retiring or separating. And for those of you who have already left the military, maybe you didn't know all of this information, and so it's never too late to start, right? I think that's one of the great things about kind of when we talk about finances is that you have control over it. So you can start today changing either spending behaviors or changing how you're educating yourself or changing the way you approach your finances. It's never too late. That's something we hear kind of a lot too, is people say, well, you know, I haven't been saving, so what do I do? And so you start today, right? You start today with the next right move and move forward in that. So that's what I wanted to talk about today when we talk about our money after the military and what does that look like. I wanted to just kind of hit on those really big high level things that either you are aware of or you weren't aware of, and know that Armed Forces Mutual is a trusted resource for you. So you can reach out to us at memberbenefits@afma.com. AFMA is our very long name, which is American Armed Forces Mutual Aid Association, but we go by Armed Forces Mutual. You can reach out to our member benefits team with those questions. They're happy to help you, to help guide you in the right direction, and get on the right footing. So hopefully today, this has given some people some things to think about, whether you're getting ready and gearing up for transition or you're already in the transition space, maybe a year or two. I fully understand how complicated it is and how it takes time to settle in. And so if you're finding yourself with questions now, please just reach out to us and we're here to help.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Sarah. And thank you for, sharing that and giving people this information in a way that feels realistic and is in a really good starting point, and easy to understand. Um, you know, for everyone who joined us today, we'll be sharing links to the resources that Sarah has mentioned during this session. Amy, are there any frequently asked questions before we wrap up?
They're the only one that I see so far. So please, people, feel free, put your questions in there. I'm monitoring it, and Sarah will take them live. And I can speak to this one as well, being a past military spouse and coming through that transition just a couple years ago. The tax bill can be a big surprise. And so I'm one in the chat was asking, do you guys have specific tax information out there, tips that, transitioning service members can take to prepare for that first tax bill? What should they do beforehand so they're not hit with that big surprise?
Yeah, that's a great question. So the first thing to do, I will say, I'll refer back to, is the military versus civilian pay. So understanding on each one of those line items, just even Googling, right? How your BAS or BAH is coming to you to understand what that looks like in a taxable way. I can also tell you, Armed Forces Mutual has, we have a wealth management and trust division. And so we're a fiduciary organization, and you can reach out to our wealth management and trust division. If you want to, you can drop right into member benefits at afma.com, and I can field your question over to them. And they have certified financial planners and counselors who can actually walk through your specific case and say, this is what your tax bill is going to look like. And so they can do the hard work of figuring that out to the penny. But I would say for myself, one of the things, my husband retired. And so when he retired, I made sure that we went back into DFAS and we checked his withholdings. Because sometimes when you go from active duty to a retirement status, they clear out your withholdings. Now, not all the time, just sometimes. So I made sure we went back in there and made sure that his withholdings were still there, and that we weren't all of a sudden just seeing, all of our money every month. And so that was something that was very tangible that I made sure that was for us that we were doing. And then the other thing was, I have worked in the civilian world, so I'm very familiar with all my taxes and money that came out, but was looking to his new pay to see, okay, now you're making this amount of money. You can put money into a 401k now. You can contribute there, and we can lower our taxable rate or withholding. So those are kind of all options that we looked at to figure out how to make sure we weren't getting hit with that really big 1 year out tax bill. So hopefully that answered the question.
No, great tip.
Reach out.
Great tips. Speaking from experience, my husband's reset, and we didn't know what his withholdings were, and that was part of our surprise. So great tip there. I've got a couple other questions, but first, you said something that I wanted to come back to. You talked about your fiduciary arm. And can you break down what that means for the people listening? Like, to be a fiduciary, what does that mean, and why is that important? Because we talk a lot about you're not out there alone, and there's people to help you. So I'm sorry, go ahead. If you don't mind breaking that down for us.
Yeah, absolutely, Amy. And that's a great clarifying question, right? What is a fiduciary? So a fiduciary organization is an organization that is regulated by the state that they're in, which means every year the state comes in and they say, we want to see how you are doing and serving in the best interest of your client. And so that means from a financial standpoint, we have to show and prove we made, these changes, or we advised this because of this. And so it is a standard of care, right? To show your clients, to say, we do what is in the best interest of our client, not what we just feel like we want to do or for a bottom line in some way. And so fiduciary organizations, anybody who's looking for financial information or financial help, look to a fiduciary organization. Armed Forces Mutual is different in the sense that we are very poised to talk about military benefits and entitlements, these nuanced things that sometimes others don't understand, like your DFAS resetting or SBP or things like that. So that's, kind of sets us apart, but the fiduciary portion is really important. I would also say, since we're talking about that if anybody is going to say, I would ask, and these are questions that I ask as well, right? Is, do you get a commission? Are you getting paid off of what you're telling me or advising me? That's a really great question to ask. And just, so that everybody understands kind of what the intent of somebody is. Fiduciary organizations are not allowed to do that, right? You're not allowed to get a payment or any type of compensation for putting somebody into some certain proprietary investment. So a fiduciary can't do that. They're just there to say, this is what we feel is in the best interest of you moving forward.
Absolutely. Great breakdown. And I think that's great for all of our attendees to know, like certain financial counselors and advisors and things, they can call themselves whatever they want, but to really, you really want someone who's going to always act in your best interest. So definitely ask that question. So thank you for breaking that down. All right. So I have another one for you, and we've chatted about something along these lines offline. So I know you can take this question. So what advice do you have for EFMP families with adult children?
Oh, that's great. So the military community has a very high, compared to the civilian sector, EFMP and special needs children. That's just the makeup of our community and demographic. So it's really important that we talk about this. There are some great resources out there. One of them we were chatting about earlier is ABLE accounts. From a financial standpoint, really talking with somebody who understands when the parent should pass away, how is money going to go to this child to ensure that the child can continue to be cared for, whether it is an underage child or an adult. child. And so it's very important how money is allocated, because sometimes if you leave money with really great intent for your child to be able to have healthcare benefits and to live on, because they're handicapped, then there can be times where you all of a sudden tap out or cap out of certain programs that they've been receiving. And so it's really important to understand how you're leaving the money and in what way, so that that child can continue to get all of the care that they need when you're not there to help them. And ABLE accounts is a great way to do that and to understand that.
Absolutely. And not a shameless plug. Crystal, I see you were going
I
to
was going to say,
chime
go
in.
ahead. No, go ahead.
But we actually just hosted a webinar on ABLE accounts. So for any of you out there that may be an EFMP family and are not aware of ABLE accounts, go out to our website and look at our resource center. Listen to that. We have able.org, ablenrc.org here with us as a subject matter expert, just as Sarah is our today's subject matter expert. But they really shed light on all the questions of things you need to know around that ability to save for someone in your family that may, or for yourself if you have a disability. So let's see, I have another question out there. This is from, okay. Oh, actually, maybe this is just a comment. So when a service member retires, they need, and this goes back to what we were saying, they need to sit down with an experienced tax advisor that, like Sarah said, that actually understands military service, because you can sit with someone who has no idea. We speak in a lot of acronyms. We're all military spouses here. So we speak in a lot of acronyms. It took me 20 years to learn them all. But, so definitely I would say someone who has that military experience. But he goes on to say, so they can file the appropriate W-4s and W-4Ps to correctly balance that withholding. And then he says, just a comment, and that he loves what we're presenting. So thank you for that comment. So
Thank you.
we still have a few minutes. Crystal, did you have any questions out there that you saw, or?
Well, no, I was just going to say before we wrap up, Sarah, so if there are three takeaways that you hope veterans and those listening in today take away from today's presentation, what would they be? What are those top three things they should keep in their head as they begin this financial transition?
Yeah. Number one, keep Armed Forces Mutual in the back of your head as a resource. And please, we're here to help. So that would be one thing. The second thing that I would really recommend is understanding that military versus civilian pay and everything that goes with it, right? The taxes, the take home, right? Your new take home pay. How are you going to live? How are you going to pay all of your bills after you leave the military? That would be my second really biggest one. It's the one that we see the most of with kind of downfalls that can happen. So keep Armed Forces Mutual in the forefront of your mind for help or assistance. Make sure that you understand that military versus civilian pay. And then the next thing that I would say, the third thing is talk to your family or spouse. I know it's not a financial thing per se, but if you're going through a military transition or you already have transitioned, it's not easy. So communication is so important. Communicate with your spouse or your family about things. And then if you find that you're not getting the answers or help, then look for resources, right? Look for the trusted resources like the fiduciaries, things like that. So those are kind of be my three top advice there.
No,
That's
I love
great.
that.
Yes.
Thank you.
Now, I know we're getting close to time, but there is one more question that just popped up, if you're willing, and I'm not sure if you can answer this or not, but it says, and I know part of this answer, but I'm looking for clarification too. So it says, my understanding is before we retire, we can set his SBP, which is benefits, right, after pension plan, to include our adult child. Is that correct? And I believe there's an age cutoff there, right?
Yeah. So SBP, I could talk for hours about SBP and all the nuances around SBP. So great question. Love that you're educating yourself on it before retirement. That is so important. SBP is a decision that is to be made with the service member and the spouse. The spouse has to sign off on that. And to the question directly is yes. You can pick spouse and children when you pick and elect SBP. Now, a child can be a child under the age of 18, right? As we normally think of a child. It can be a school age child up to, I believe, age 23 or 26 if they're in school. And then it can also be a dependent handicapped child, which is what DFAS qualifies as, a special needs child. So for our EFMP families, the child can be added, meaning that you do have to do additional paperwork to show that this is an adult handicapped child, but they're still a dependent of yours. And so they can be listed on SBP. Something I will say about that is a lot of times our special needs families realize they need a special needs trust to protect that money so that one day when the child receives the SBP as an adult child or dependent, adult dependent, that money doesn't tap them out into other programs they might be in. So if you are an EFMP family or you have a special needs adult child, it's really important to understand how that SBP is going to flow to the child and then what you need to do ahead of time to make sure that DFAS has all the paperwork in line for that child.
Great answer. Great answer.
Did I miss anything on that, Amy?
No, you answered everything. Well, one question to follow up is if the child is not special needs, you can elect to keep them on SBP until is it 22 or 21? What's the age?
I don't want to misspeak on that. I'd have to look it up. It's either 22 or 23 based off of if they're enrolled in a university.
Right.
If they're like under TRICARE young adult, right? If they can get health care, they're considered still a dependent. One of the things I will tell you quickly, if we have time, a short story, and my husband and I did this as well, is that with SBP, if you have just underage children who are under the age of 18, or even if they are above the age of 18, but they're school age children, they're still enrolled in a college or university, they're still considered a dependent of you, is that SBP for them is a very minimum cost. And it's like very minimum. I think it costs us like $9 for our kiddos. Yeah, it's so small. But what that does, right? And some people don't realize what that does is maybe you think, I don't want to pay for the spouse because it's a lot more, it can be hundreds and hundreds of dollars. But if you elect for at least a child to be on your SBP because they're under the age of 18, they're not a handicapped child, then if anything should happen, though, to that child while they are still considered a dependent, then SBP would stay with them now for the remainder of their life, right? As a now maybe handicapped or a dependent child. So that's really important. I actually had this happen. I had a retiring colonel. He was an 06. I briefed him on this. He had underage children, and this was about 10 years ago. And they elected not to take SBP for their spouse, but they elected to take it for the kids based off of it's really inexpensive and it's just kind of this protective measure. And sure enough, their son was in a tragic car accident and will never live independently on his own again at age 16. And because they elected that, their now 16-year-old son has the full protection of SBP for the remainder of that child's life. And he came back to me, and I had no idea. He came back to me and he told me the story, and he said that one small thing changed the trajectory of my family and child forever because I know that he will have income. So, it was an unforeseen thing, but it's a really great protective measure for children. So
what peace of mind for a special needs parent, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Great answer. Thank you so much for taking all these questions.
Yes. Very informative.
I think that's the last one we have, Crystal.
The last one? Okay, well then I will close this out. Sarah, thank you again. This has been extremely informative. Thank you for sharing those top takeaways and just, help breaking this down into a way that's, manageable. I think that's really important. For anyone who joined today, Amy, I'll share about the resources mentioned during the session, including materials from Veteran Saves and Armed Forces Mutual. You'll be able to find more on veteransaves.org. And of course, anyone who has signed up and registered for this webinar will receive a recording. So you can revisit it or even maybe share it with someone who you think might need it. And we just encourage you to take time to explore those resources on our site and that Sarah has mentioned, and just think about what that next step, looks like for you. And we also encourage you to always take the Veteran Saves Pledge. It's a way to create that goal, and we'll follow up with tips and support in webinars like this with people like, Armed Forces Mutual. And yeah, if any questions come up later, feel free to reach out to us on social, or you can email us at save@americasaves.org. And I'm sure if you have any questions for Sarah, you can see that the email is right there. So we thank you so much for being here with us today.
Thank you. Thank you, Crystal. Thank you, Amy. And thank you, Veteran Saves, for all of the education and resources that you're putting out to our military community. It's needed and it's wonderful to be a part of it. So thank you so much.
Thank you. So glad to work with you. Thanks. Bye,
Yes,
everyone.
thank you. Bye bye.
Bye.